welcome to Trinity United Church. As part of our centennial celebrations, we present a century of wedding fashions, a comprehensive look at the fashions of the last 100 years. Through music, the recollection of important historical events, and also facts about fashion rules and trends, we'll take a sentimental look at the decades that have brought us to this point in time. This show would not have been possible without the overwhelming support of those who search closets, trunks, and attics for clothing treasures to lend. We appreciate all the donations and are truly grateful. And now, please prepare yourself for a reminiscent look at the last century. Imagine the turn of the century, a time when Western Canada was being settled by immigrants, and the Yukon Gold Rush attracted vast numbers of people seeking their fortune. Life in Canada was difficult, and living conditions somewhat primitive by today's standards. In fashion, the introduction of the sewing machine in the late 1800s had transformed the garment industry, allowing standardized sizes and rapid reproduction. However, there were those in the US and Europe who could afford private seamstresses. It was this aristocracy that set the fashion trends in 1890. Fashion etiquette and rules were very precise at the turn of the century. Dresses for everyday wear, including walking and shopping, had ankle-length skirts. Daytime ceremonies required skirt lengths that would just show the tip of the shoe. For evening, the length remained the same, but a small train was added. Necklines were high, stand-up collars for day, but in the evening, long necks and short sleeves were appropriate for both young and old. Accessories included hats, which were worn to create an illusion of height, matching parasols, fans, button-up boots, but very little jewelry. Corsets by this time had been shortened, and the bustle was no longer fashionable, but padding of all sorts was used to achieve the ideal hourglass figure. Locally, the property on which this church is built was purchased from the Cowan family in 1894, and construction commenced almost immediately. The Ladies' Aid, using the new Miracle Fiber crepe paper, fashioned flower pot covers and lampshades to sell at bazaars to raise funds for construction. Local businessman W.J. Hoyle was elected to the Ontario Legislature in 1895 and remained in office for over 20 years. In the early 1900s, the world witnessed Annie Taylor's successful barrel ride over Niagara Falls, the Wright brothers' first motor-driven flight in Kitty Hawk, the Ford Motor Company began production in Windsor, and the horrifying sinking of the highly acclaimed cruise ship, the Titanic. The now infamous Anne of Green Gables had just hit the shelves. Immigrants were hired to operate sewing machines in sweatshops 14 to 18 hours a day, earning up to $14 a week. Novice operators made at best $4 per week. Costume parties were all the rage for the well-to-do. Wedding fashion etiquette in early 1900s called for costumes appropriate to the formality of the ceremony. Church weddings required trains of great length, while shorter trains were used for less formal functions. June was the traditional wedding month for very practical reasons. The trousseau required only summer garments. In town, milliner shops drew huge crowds of women to spring open houses, featuring the latest creations in elaborate hats. 1905 saw the only pipe organ in the village installed here at Trinity, and in 1915, the Ladies' Aid purchased the bell for the tower. Other notable events include the introduction of milk delivery in town, and in 1910, Mrs. W.J. Cowan could be seen about Cannington in the first local chauffeur-driven car. In 1914, Britain declared war on Germany. World War I would shake up the economic and social structures of all countries involved. This era would prove to be revolutionary for women in both fashion and their role in society. Out of of necessity, women in the cities had to go to work in factories, which made long skirts and fancy clothes impractical. Women now resorted to coveralls and trousers. This would be the last radical change in the history of Western costume. By 1920, the war was over, and after several years of conservatism, everyone was ready to let their hair down. Or more accurately, have it bobbed. These were the Roaring Twenties. Headlines included the Bernardo children, the discovery of insulin at U of T, and prohibition. Women had discovered a new independence and were ready to assert themselves. The new look was the flapper. Gone were the restrictive corsets and meters of material, replaced by a slender, flat-chested, long-waisted silhouette with lots of leg. By 1927, skirts had climbed to just below the knee, and as the hemlines rose, the accessory strands of pearls got longer. Although women had won the right to vote in 1920, the Supreme Court in 1929 unanimously decided that women were non-persons and therefore not eligible for election to the Senate. Here at Trinity, the first Shipman stained glass window was installed in 1922. The Great War Memorial window followed a year later. That same year, a hurricane would blow the War Memorial window into the sanctuary and the Shipman window onto the lawn. These were repaired and the Brandon window was installed the year after. Later in the decade, Cameron Street was paved, the wooden Dobson Bridge replaced with one of concrete, and a cenotaph erected in McLeod Park. The post-war honeymoon of the 20s was to be short-lived, as the Canadian stock market crashed in 1929. Tragedy dominated the 1930s. The Depression brought high unemployment, leaving many city dwellers homeless and hungry. A terrible drought in Western Canada caused Indians to again perform the rain dance, which had been declared illegal. Farms were literally buried in sand. Highlights of this time included appointment of the first female senator, just 6 months after being declared a non-person. The birth of the DR Quince on May 28, 1934, and William Lyon Mackenzie King's landslide victory. Elsewhere, Edward VIII abdicated the throne to wed Mrs. Wallace Simpson, and trouble was just beginning when Adolf Hitler became Chancellor of Germany in 1933. By 1939, Germany had conquered Poland. At home, the second Shipman window was installed, a new roof put on the church, and the interior redecorated. During this period, Trinity was referred to as the powerhouse. Now, the flapper bag had run its course, replaced by longer dresses with long flowing panels, though countrywomen found trousers more practical for working. Men's suit fashions were to last for the next 30 years, with high-waisted, double-breasted pleated trousers, padded shoulders, tapered sleeves, and moderate lapels. With the threat of war hanging heavily over the country in early 1940, hundreds of men rushed their sweethearts to the altar in an effort to beat the July 15th draft deadline. Women were free to join the armed forces. With the bombing of Pearl Harbor, Canada, the US, and Britain were at war with Japan. Japanese Canadians were forced into detention camps out of fear they would assist in an invasion. The disastrous raid on Dieppe, D-Day at Normandy, and the bombing of Hiroshima are vivid reminders of the destruction of war. Post-war years saw an elevation in racial intolerance. During this upheaval, the first baby bonus was introduced. Due to the outbreak of World War II, clothing was uniform and drab, the fashion model being make, do, and mend. Uniforms were worn everywhere by service members of both sexes. The body silhouette was a plain rectangle, a box-shaped jacket with padded shoulders and a narrow skirt. In Europe, the key word was practical, which accounted for ample hooded jackets useful in sleeping outside, kangaroo pockets that could be hurriedly filled with treasures, and dumpy, wedge-soled shoes made for miles of walking. A virtual fashion revolution occurred during the 40s with the introduction of synthetic fibers. This made it possible to wear clean underwear every day, since yesterday's could be washed and dried in a matter of hours. The post-war years were the beginning of the commuting age here in town. It was cheaper to build a home here and then drive south to work, so many smaller modern homes popped up throughout town. In 1947, the community center was erected on its current site. At Trinity, the Oregon Charms were donated by the Women's Association in memory of those who served in World War II. A Young Adults Club was created in 1946, later renamed the 3M Club in 1961, and remained active until 1985. 1950s, like the 20s, focused on the youth of a post-war society. This was the time for parties, proms, and sweet 16s. Formal attire, such as wedding gowns, featured tight, fitted bodices, often strapless, full skirts with crinolines, and long gloves. most noted for their youth culture trends, the greasers and bobby soxers. For young women, fashion didn't about face, suggesting loose schoolgirl looks for adults. This included the appliqué poodle skirts worn with sweater sets and bobby socks, or culottes, plain or tartan, with a blouse and the signature side-tie neckerchief. Regardless of the outfit, hair was long and either tied in a ponytail or hanging loose. Other looks included tomboys dressed in a Wild West theme of jeans and plaid shirts, or the Marilyn Monroe lookalikes in high heels, pencil-slim skirts, and tight sweaters. Young men also fell victim to trends, and this was certainly evident during the 50s. In this time of rebellion, gangs were popular. The look consisted of a knee-length, single-breasted jacket with padded shoulders for added bulk, skin-tight, rain-tight jeans, 2-inch thick-soled shoes with fluorescent socks, and a slim gym tie. Hair was carefully slicked into the popular style known as a duck's tail. Naturally, like all fads, this look was passé by 1956, and a new trend was in. Two especially memorable events, aside from the floods in Manitoba and the introduction of the polio vaccine, were the crowning of Queen Elizabeth II in 1952 and Elvis Presley played Maybelline Gardens in front of 24,000 screaming fans. Here in town, the church was rewired, new lighting was installed, and a modern kitchen and washrooms built. In 1955, Thea Stone donated the amplifying system for the organ and chimes. Premier Leslie J. Frost officially opened Ontario North District High School in 1953. And in 1957, the ice plant was installed at the arena and the curling rink added. 5 years later, the community center would be destroyed by fire. In 1959, a ceremony and reception were held in Trinity United Church for Diane Farewell Amos, the first girl guide in this area to receive her gold cord. The 1960s was probably most noted for the make love not war attitude of youth and young adults. A dynamic new group from England, the Beatles exploded onto the music scene, playing both Vancouver and Toronto in 1964. This group had a noticeable influence on fashion for teens. Hair was longer and clothes more stylish. This included velvet suits, pre-faded jeans, and hipster corduroys. Another obvious fashion statement was that of hippies, which was characterized by layers of bulky clothing because there were more important issues to expend one's energy on than dress. For girls, Twiggy and her micro mini skirt was the look to copy. However, by the mid-60s, clothing was more romantic. Frilly blouses and skirts were the favorite bell-bottom pants. Of course, Most notable events of the 60s, President Kennedy's assassination, Barbara Wagner and Bob Hall win Olympic gold in pair skating, the Hockey Hall of Fame opens, a new Canadian flag is unveiled, and Northern Dancer, owned by Winfield Farms, becomes the first Canadian-bred horse to win the Kentucky Derby. The drug thalidomide is withdrawn from the market, but not before many lives are devastated by the unknown side effects. And a huge outdoor concert makes Woodstock, New York a near-famous name, even for generations to come. This decade brought RC Lumber and the new rebuilt arena to Cannington. In May 1960, Gert Graham directed the play Turn My Face Toward the East, which won top honors at presbytery and conference levels. The following year, the two women's groups at Trinity united to form the UCW, and in 1966, Thelma Found and Marva McFadden started our junior choir, which is still active today. At this time, there will be a brief intermission. Please feel free to stand and stretch or wander about to look at picture displays. Be sure to sign our guest book at the back if you haven't already done so. We would ask, however, that you please remain upstairs. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Wanda Stride and Margaret Shearer, singing Perhaps Love. They are accompanied today by Anne Robertson.
It is this to give you comfort, it is there to
1970s was the beginning of the me generation. People began calling for equal rights. Environmental issues such as acid rain and an end to seal hunting also gained popularity. On the political stage, Pierre Trudeau married Margaret Sinclair, with whom he had 3 children and later divorced in 1983. Quebec Labour Minister Pierre Laporte was kidnapped by the MLQ. Tragically, his body was found 8 days later in the trunk of a car. Sports highlights include the 76 Olympics in Montreal and the unforgettable goal scored by Paul Henderson with 34 seconds left that gave Team Canada a series win over the Soviet Union. Other facts worth noting were the parliamentary decision to adopt the metric system, Mikhail Baryshnikov's defection from the USSR, and the RCMP opened their ranks to female members. extended into the world of fashion too. Everyday casual wear had loud color schemes and patterns and attention-getting style. Women in business, focused on achieving equal status with men, briefly experimented with tailored three-piece suits and neckties. Thankfully, this was a short-lived trend. At Trinity, the 70s gave birth to Vacation Bible School, still alive and well today, and Breakfast Club, which evolved into New Jerusalem, a musical youth group that enjoyed more than a decade of presenting contemporary Christian cantatas to congregations from Havelock, Ontario to Sarasota, Florida. New Jerusalem will be back together for a reunion performance here at Trinity in just 2 weeks' time. Earlier in the decade, Melvin McFadden celebrated 50 years as organist here. the 1970s me decade, evolved the 1980s, Morrison me. It was a consumerist decade. Money was plentiful, real estate values went through the roof, and yuppies had it all. Big job, big house, big car. Life was fast and furious everywhere. This included sports, politics, and scientific advancement. In sports, Gordie Howe announced his retirement from hockey at age 52. Canada joined several other countries in a boycott of the Moscow Olympics. Wayne Gretzky reached 1,000 points in 424 games, the first of two records he would break while playing for the Edmonton Oilers. He was later traded to the LA Kings in a move that stunned the sports world. Vicky Keith completed a double crossing of Lake Ontario. Brian Orser won the men's world title in 1987, and Kurt Browning became the first to land a quadruple jump in competition. Ben Johnson went down in disgrace when he tested positive for steroid use and was stripped of a gold medal at the Olympics in Seoul, Korea. An unknown man with a big heart began his marathon of hope on April 12, 1980 in St. John's, Newfoundland. Later, diagnosed with lung cancer, he was forced to quit on September 2nd, having reached Thunder Bay. Then, on June 28, 1981, all of Canada mourned the loss of a true hero, Terry Fox, age 22, when he succumbed to the disease he had been running to beat. At the time of his death, $23 million in his name had been raised for cancer research. We also remember others who died during the 80s, Vera Villeneuve, Lenny Gould, Margaret Lawrence, and Renee Levesque. Science by this time had made considerable advances. The Cannington journeyed into space on the U.S. shuttle Columbia, and closer to home, the first test tube twins were born in 1982 to an Oakville couple. Later, in 1988, Canada welcomed its first test tube twins. AIDS was to become a fast-spreading fighting disease and the new focus for Hollywood fundraisers. In the political field, this decade gave us the first female Speaker of the House, Madame Solvay, later made first female Governor General, and the first female leader of a national political party in Audrey McLaughlin. Pierre Trudeau and Ed Broadbent both bowed out of the political limelight. During the 80s, Canada was privileged with visits from the Prince and Princess of Wales, Pope John Paul II, and Queen Elizabeth II, who signed our new Canadian Constitution. Our much-loved Loonie coin was introduced to major cities in 1987, and the last $1 bills were printed in 1989. Everything was glitz and glitter until the stock market crashed in late 1987. Statistically, this collapse had doubled the effect on the economy when compared to the crash of '29. Locally, communities not far from here were nearly destroyed by a tornado in 1985. At Trinity, the Finance and Property Committee initiated the window project, intended to preserve the stained glass windows in the sanctuary. With the funds raised, each window was removed in pieces, taken to Toronto for refurbishing, and then reinstalled. All this work was completed by the original installers. The fashions of the 80s also reflected the wealth of the decade. The clothing of popular TV series such as Dallas and Dynasty was copied on the runways and streets. Jackets and skirt ensembles and poof dresses, the more glamorous the better, were all the rage. Physical fitness was a new fad, and gyms appeared on every corner with aerobics classes packed with lycra and spandex-clad patrons battling the bulge. This too changed when the bottom fell into the stock market. Wealthy shoppers were suddenly broke, forcing designers and the average citizen to reevaluate priorities. And here we are, halfway through the 1990s. Experts telling us that we're recovering, albeit slowly, from a deep recession. Many have been affected by the downsizing of large corporations, and job security, once taken for granted, remains tenuous. From the fashion scene, the in-look is grunge. Most popular with teens, this look might include oversized jeans and a plaid work shirt, thrift shop dresses, flashing prints, and of course, Doc Martens. The heavy black full wear ranging from shoe to mid-calf combat boot styles, identified among wearers by the number of lace holes. The look is layered and loose. 70s look blouses with a romantic ruffled look are in, paired with the new mini and leggings. Little girls' hats with their flipped up brims are reminiscent of a flapper. So far, the key phrase for the 90s is dress down and be comfortable. Another popular fashion, reflected in television Old West series and influenced by the new country music, is the Western look, complete with jeans, buckles, boots, and bolo tie. More sincere than the brief early cowboy fad of the late 70s to early 80s, this could be a reflection of the society's desire to get back to a simpler way of life. This is evident in environmental concerns, the popularity of antique sales and shops, in century home restorations instead of demolitions. Wedding etiquette for the last 15 years has been largely dependent on the couple's personal tastes, rather than a stranger's ideal of what is proper. With most couples are still being married in the church, some prefer more unusual locations like tropical islands, or where they first met, be it a laundromat or Ferris wheel. Color choices also vary these days. Bridal gowns may be white, ivory, pink, and yes, brides have even been married black. There is, however, one tradition that has stood the test of time: the tossing of the bridal bouquet. In In the 5 short years, the world has already witnessed history in the making, most notably the tearing down of the Berlin Wall and the impact this has had on other communist countries. Today, people around the world are celebrating the 50th anniversary of the liberation of Holland. Will recent events such as the standoff with the Davidian cult in Waco, Texas, and the horrifying bombing in Oklahoma reach the pages of future history texts? Who can say? But they have definitely had an impact on the lives of people today. Not long ago, the world mourned the loss of 2 legendary figures, Howard Cosell and Ginger Rogers. Local controversies include the unfortunate demolition of the once Grand Queens Hotel, the construction of a central administration building, paper sludge spread as fertilizer, and the future 404 extension. All of these ongoing events will have some impact, as yet undefined, on the future of this community and surrounding areas. At Trinity, some restorative brickwork and electrical upgrading have been completed in anticipation of this centennial year and another 100 years of work and worship in the community. Will these trends continue to the end of the decade? Probably. Into the next century? Maybe. It is far easier to analyze the past than it is to predict the future. It is now my pleasure to introduce Nancy Parliament singing Time in a Bottle, accompanied on the piano by Ann Robertson. And now, in closing, we present a panoramic history of the last century as told through fashion.
I see it blue, early in you, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, dark summer night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying how they do. They say, I love you. I hear babies cry. I watch them grow. They're like much more than I never knew. And I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world. Ooh, yeah.
At this time, I would like to call on Carrie Baird to come forward. behalf of the congregation here at Trinity, and especially the members of TNT, we would like to thank you, Carrie, for all of the hours and hours and hours and hours of time and effort you have put into helping pull together such a grand undertaking. Thank you for being the catalyst that pulled us together so that we could pull this off.